Good morning, everybody. Orange J here with my first ever No Kuni Cross Worlds video, and today we're going to talk about which class you should play in No Kuni Cross Worlds. Now, there's a couple things to consider when making this choice. The first thing you should consider, and the focus of today's video, is going to be what role do these classes fill, specifically in a group context. Grouping is a big part of No Kuni Cross Worlds. It's an MMO, you're meant to play with other players, it's important that you play with other players, so while you're playing with other players, what do you want to do in that group? That's the main focus of today's video. We're going to look at all 5 classes, we're going to look at their core skills, and briefly talk about their, I'll call it sub-skills or job skills. There's basically a pool you'll be able to pick from. Now, that pool gets tricky, and that's where we get into the second video, the follow-up video to this, which is going to be how free-to-play friendly are these classes. Some of them, you can get a lot of their best skills for free through just the systems in-game. Some of them require a little bit more RNG luck. Some of them require some paying money. So we'll talk about all that in the second video. But first, we need to establish what these classes do, and that's the focus today. So let's start off with the big boy himself, the Destroyer. Now, look, if you want a tank in No Kuni Cross Worlds, the Destroyer is the class you want to play. This is the tank. He looks like the tank. He's big, he's muscular, uses a big hammer, does big damage, and slows the enemy. So here you see his core skills. Each character is going to have 3 skills that you just get straight away. They are a part of your kit. For the Destroyer, you have Full Swing. This is Garen from League of Legends. You spin around in a circle. You have an axe instead of a sword like Garen, but whatever. You spin, you win, you do a lot of DPS. You have to be right up on the mobs, obviously, but it's simple skill, spin to win. Brutal Strike, that's going to be your second skill with the Destroyer. It's a 2-hit combo that knocks down enemies. So a little bit of crowd control right here from the Destroyer. Very, very useful and a very good part of his core kit. And then you have Ground Slam. This is a gap closing ability. The Destroyer will leap towards the enemy and then pound the ground, doing AoE damage and slowing the mob's hit. So those are your 3 core moves. Note that none of those are a taunt, none of those are a shield. The Destroyer does have access to those moves, however, they are those optional abilities, some of which are behind a little bit of a paywall. We'll cover that in the next video. So that's the Destroyer. Look, TLDR with Destroyer, if you want a tank, this is your guy. I'll tell you right now, not the most free-to-play not the most free-to-play friendly, but not the least either. Okay, next up, let's go to the Rogue. And the Rogue in No Kuni Cross Worlds is going to be your ranged DPS unit. Uses a bow, is highly mobile, is very good at kiting, and crucially has big time DPS steroid buffs for your group. If we're looking at the 3 core skills, the 3 you just get, you have Rain of Arrows. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's an AoE, literal rain of arrows that also slows down the movement speed of the enemies. A lot of these classes have an AoE slow in their kit. You can tell that's just a big part of this game. Rain of Arrows will do that for the Rogue. It'll also help him kite. You have Multi-Shot. This is a frontal cone attack that also has a pushback on the enemies. So if they're getting close to you or you need to clear some space, you can push them back with this, and it also applies a slow, just like Rain of Arrows does. You're going to see a lot of slows in these core kits, you guys. And then you have Evasion Shot. This is a shot forward while a jump backwards. So while the Destroyer has a gap closer, the Rogue has a gap separator. You have a jump back from your enemy that also does damage. The Rogue is fairly straightforward to play, I think. It's your kiting class, range DPS, and very importantly, has the ability to buff the group's damage in their optional abilities. The Rogue is also a fairly free-to-play friendly class. Again, more on that later. But if you want to be a range DPS class, you like to kite, you like to play a ranger in some other games, or a hunter, something like that, the Rogue could be for you. Okay, next up, let's go to the Witch. And okay, if you know anything about me, if you followed my channel at all in the past, you should know that I have a thing for spear waifus in my mobile games. And the Witch is a spear waifu in this game. She's a DPS class, a glass cannon, who uses a spear. Look, Like, I'm all about the witch. I'll tell you right now that the witch is going to be my main class in Ni no Kuni. Now, yes, you can play alts in this game, and in fact, you are heavily rewarded for playing alts in this game. The thing is, when you're pulling on the gacha systems, a big part of the gacha system, in fact about half of it, is a weapon gacha, and whatever character you're pulling on, you are guaranteed to get that type of weapon. So for example, if you were pulling on the gacha as a witch, you will get spears, which means if you wanted to switch classes at some point, well, you're gonna have a lot of spears and not a lot of bows. That's an aside. That's probably a whole different video in and of itself. Let's focus back in on the witch. I just got excited because it's my class. Anyway, Piercing Storm. That's the first ability in her kit. She throws a spear for a straight line AoE attack that also knocks down enemies. So a nice little frontal AoE with a knockdown built in. That's great, especially for somebody like the witch who is a glass cannon. Being able to crowd control, help keep yourself alive. That's a big part of the witch's kit. Dancing Spear. This is an AoE based on the character, so she's in the center of it. And it's kind of her like, oh no skill. It does a lot of damage to mobs and gives her a 10% damage reduction shield while she's channeling it. So you're standing still channeling, get a little DPS shield, and do a lot of damage. And then we have Storm Spear, a frontal cone AoE damage that, guess what? It slows enemies. And I noticed that I just misspelled that. Too late, it's going in the video. Rip me and the English teachers out there. But a frontal cone AoE that slows. Of course she has a slow, everybody has a slow. Now, the thing with the witch to consider is within her optional abilities, she has a really OP combo that is like a big DPS attack plus a blink, right? That really adds to her mobility as a blink. The problem is, those are either rare drops or pay-to-win skills, so she's definitely not a free-to-play friendly class. Now, I don't mind spending a little money in my mobile games, and I cover them professionally, so that doesn't bother me. But if you're thinking about playing a DPS class, I'll tell you right now, the witch is not going to be the most free-to-play friendly. She does, however, have a really free-to-play accessible debuff for an enemy that increases the damage they take, so that's a part of her kit. And you'll notice something here, that all of these DPS classes that we talk about have some form of utility that they're bringing to their group. For the witch, it comes in terms of like debuffing the enemy. For the rogue, it came in terms of buffing the damage of the rest of your group. That will be a theme you will see throughout this game. Okay, that's it for the witch. Let's go next to the engineer. And just like the Destroyer, the Engineer is a very straightforward pick in my opinion. Do you like to play healers in your MMOs? If you do, you play the Engineer. This is the best healer in the game. It is like the best supporter in the game in my opinion. Yes, some other classes have some heals. The Engineer is by far and away your best healer. Uses guns, the only class in the game that can resurrect their allies, and does a respectable amount of damage on top of all of that. If we look at their core 3 skills, you have Burst Coil, which is an artillery shot, comes down from the sky, sort of like Rain of Arrows, right? AoE damage, but stuns the mobs. Stun, very powerful status effect to inflict, good skill. Elemental Blast is like a flamethrower looking frontal based AoE that, guess what? Guess what, guys? It slows mobs. Shocking! She has a slow, so that slows the mobs. And then you have Explosive Bullet, which is literally just a rocket launcher. She just, it shoots an RPG forward, it blows up, AoE damage, pretty easy to understand. Now, the core of the Engineer's kit comes with their alternate abilities, the ones you will acquire in the game either through drops, systems the games provide, or money. The nice thing about the Engineer is, some of their best skills are very, very free to play accessible. Things you will just get in the game or things that will just drop. So the Engineer is a fairly free to play friendly class. Again, I'll rank them all later. I'm not ready to do that just yet, but if you want to play a healer and you want to be like really important for groups, I think the Engineer could be a good option for you because you'll be wanted. Like, what group doesn't need a healer? Like, every group does. And you know, sometimes they're hard to come by. If you've ever done games with dungeon finders in them, if you're playing a healer or a tank, a lot of times those dungeon finders are just like that. Keep that in mind. Okay, we have one class to talk about left. That's the Swordsman. Let's go there now. And the Swordsman is a very, very interesting class in this game. Now, uses swords, obviously, it's a swordsman, but is more of a true hybrid character, a little bit of everything. Do you want to have buffs to support your group? Do you want to do a little bit of healing? You can do that as a swordsman. Do you want to do significantly damage? Like, they're a high damage class. You can do that as a swordsman. Probably less damage than something like the witch, but more utility than something like the witch does. So if you're looking for that like in between between. What I kind of like to think of is a lot of the main characters in old games where they're not real specialized, but you can kind of play them how you want. The Swordsman might be that class for you. Let's look at their core skills. You have Flash, which is an AoE around the player that deals damage, and guess what? Guess what it does? It slows. He's got a slow. I think we went 5 for 5 on every character in the game having a slow, so we all got those. Then you have Flying Slash, which is a jump and come down for close range frontal AoE. And guess what? It slows. He can do 2 slows, wow. And then you have Spinning Swords. Dash forward while dealing AoE damage around self and knock down the enemy's hit. So just within the Swordsman-like main kit, you have three forms of crowd control. 2 of them are lighter crowd control with a slow. 1 of them's hard crowd control with a knockdown. You're going to do a lot of damage, and a really nice thing about Swordsman is that their best move is obtainable for free in the game. So they're not a class that's locked really hard behind a paywall, which is nice and something to consider. I think a lot of people will play Swordsman in this game. It looks like a main character, right? Like, if you're playing RPGs, like the Swordsman kind of fits the archetype of, I have swords, I do a lot of everything. I think Swordsman will be a very popular choice in this game. So there we go. That's all 5 classes. That's the role that all 5 classes will fill. Remember, grouping in this game is going to be a big deal. And also remember, you get rewarded for playing alts in this game. So you will get to experience every class at some point, but you need to commit to one main class because of the way the gacha system works. Keep it in mind. I'll probably stress this many times as the game is coming out. If you play a swordsman and you're pulling on the weapon gacha, you're gonna pull swords, which means if you commit a lot of your premium resources into pulling swords, you don't want to switch to witch when you've put 50 hours into the game. So make the right choice early, pick the class you want to play the most. I think that's the most important thing. Now, the money issue is what it is. We'll talk about that in the next video, but pick what you're going to have fun with. And if it, pick what you're going to have fun with. Pick the role you want to play and go from there. All right, guys, that's today's video. Look forward to the follow-up video to this. And I'm looking forward to this game a lot. Like, this game looks really, really fun. So I'll see y'all in game. Have a good one. Peace.